Are you excited for the One Punch Man set but don't know where to start? Well, don't worry, because in this video, I'm going to give you 6 different deck lists to get started. Whether you're a new player diving into Union Arena for the first time, or you're a veteran who wants to go win some games this weekend with the rare battles, I got you covered. But of course, if you are a new player, I very strongly recommend checking out my How to Build a Deck series I uploaded. That will be a link in the description. They'll give you all the fundamentals that you need to get started in Union Arena. And then, of course, I will also have a tier list at the end. So truly, if you are ready to dive into this set, it is so strong, and I cannot believe that we finally got a simultaneous release for Japan. So for me, this is one of the hypest sets that we're going to get, honestly, in quite some time. So this set truly has something for everyone. But with that out of the way, let's dive in. So first and foremost, for our new players, I do want to make sure that I add this bit up front about hybrid decks. This is a term that you're going to see quite a bit throughout the community if you're coming in fresh and new, or if you're a veteran, you might have already seen this. But ultimately what it means is in Union Arena, you have 2 different style of SRs or key cards. On the left, we have Speed of Sound Sonic, which you will see a list later, that really just needs to care about all the Speed of Sonics you can possibly fit in the deck because they play off one another very, very well, right? It's a very core design that you have to build around, where something like Hellish Blizzard, well, she does have her own set, just a draw 2 filter with a opportunity to either pitch some dead cards from your hand and get back a final trigger, or just extending up the BP if you really need to push some damage, can be really strong. So it's just extremely, extremely versatile. And this will be a card, Hellish Blizzard that is, that can appear in both the Saitama and Genos deck, or in the Hellish Blizzard and in her own style of deck. I think, honestly, the event style matters. SRs that we've seen in both Terrible Tornado and Hellish Blizzard are going to be insanely strong pieces that a lot of people are going to put in and out of their yellow hybrid decks as they do start to build those out. So again, I am very excited for this set in particular and just how much of a meta impact it's going to have. So first and foremost, yes, we got to start with the man himself, Saitama. This is going to be, again, more of a traditional Genos and Saitama style of list. Again, all the deck lists in this video are really going to be more about building up the foundation, understanding what the intended archetypes were, and then I'll put up an image here really quick about the hybrid list that I had shown off in my previous video, where after some experimentation and depending on how the meta is going to go, that's where you might find a little bit more time in choosing the right pieces you want to play and finding something that works for your local meta. But overall, again, we're going to give a quick rundown of kind of key cards to expect. What does the deck want to be doing at the end of the day, right? And how good is it, which of course we'll save for the tier list at the very end. So as I mentioned up first, yes, we do have the starter deck, Saitama, which does make an appearance here. I talked about the starter deck in a previous video, but the key one here is the SR. It is a 5 energy, 2 action point, 10k attacker, but all the Saitamas in this set kind of have a little bit of a gimmick in them in terms of they either get stuck rested or they have to disappear after the battle. So do be mindful of all the Saitamas playing a little bit different, but this one does come with damage too. Right off the bat, we know how strong that can be in applying pressure. And then if you pitch another Saitama card, you can actually give it impact as well. However, the downside for this yellow Saitama is that it will remain resting until the next time it would be switched to active, so it does get stuck for a turn, as it were, and that's where King comes into play. So in this more traditional style of deck where you have the extra 0 slots, where if you were playing yellow hybrid, you don't have as many flexibility spots to allow a full 4 playsets of King here, you do get the opportunity to send him to the bottom to re-stand the Saitama, but with King, keep in mind, so you are going to lose that energy generation in the back row. That said, it is a draw trigger, which yellow decks are always happy to see, and we do have a number of double energy providers in this deck, so you are able to hit that 5 energy requirement quite easily. If you are looking for more of a mid-range style of deck, because Genos himself is a very good raid target and the color trigger can help stall out some games, that's absolutely what this version of Saitama wants to be doing. Now, I do want to give a special shout out in this version to Silver Fang as well, because as we're discarding cards or as we're playing extra cards off the Genos raid, we naturally are going to have a lower hand count. And then thankfully, Silver Fang is able to come into the deck and give us the extra draw engine that we really do need oftentimes out of yellow. And this is, again, another case where especially yellow and red in this particular set really feels like the designers kind of found their stride in terms of what effects are important or just how to round them out a little bit better. So I am very excited for this one to make an impact on the current meta and give us another yellow deck that is quite strong. Other key players in this version of the deck in particular is also Saitama's Apartment, because it is a searcher that is going to effectively replace itself for how many copies of Saitama and King it should always hit, and it provides you an energy. It's just a great thing to play into your energy line. Get at least one that's always available, because again, when we are looking to be aggressive, we do have to promote from our back line, so there will be times where it doesn't feel all that bad to have two of these in your energy line, because you're going to be raiding over other targets or pushing up a Saitama, the 3 energy version, to get a 10k attacker in, that it just sits back there and gets you the energy that you need. So 3 is probably the right number, but you could see in some cases dropping down to 2, because it is also a get trigger. So again, this deck is really all focused around some very convenient 4K attackers who work quite well with the deck, but then Saitama at the top end to give us the damage to and impact to close out the game. That is the one thing I will say is kind of the only possible drawback. I think this is a very strong deck, is that it is a little bit more conditional to get that impact, where a lot of decks that we've seen, at least in the North American version of Union Arena so far, have impact baked in, and you don't lose that attacker right away. So you do have to be a little bit more mindful. This set in particular really feels like it rewards players for knowing when to promote and how to use their energy line, but I, for one, welcome that in the game overall. And then, of course, we are just playing a full suite of the final triggers. Again, for new players, definitely go check out the deck building video, just AP resetters, and the special trigger that goes with Genos, which is just going to give you a 5k removal. And on that note, one thing to keep in mind is that the Saitama is very, very sticky, because it cannot be removed by effects. And this is something that you have to keep in mind, that when you have a 10k, it is also very difficult to just, attack through or whatnot. So even with all the BP boosting effects that we've seen in some of the other decks in North America so far, like getting to 10k, the guy's just going to be sticking around. So you do have to play the game with that in mind, that you are going to be on a clock if you are playing like a red deck and just need to push damage. So again, overall, very good deck that I think a lot of people will be very excited to play, because again, Saitama plays a pretty good role in this one, and I think overall does a nice job at getting some flavor about that one very strong punch that you can put together. Now, the other yellow deck in this set is going to be the Esper Sisters with Terrible Tornado and Hellish Blizzard. And you will note that this one is much lower on the character count, because you are playing a bunch of extra events or the site cards here to get the additional value. So in this style of deck, what we're really trying to do is line up a field that has both Terrible Tornado and Hellish Blizzard to get all of the additional effects and start looping or providing the AP reduction with Terrible Tornado to get even more value that way. Now, this does require a little bit of setup, that you have to have either event cards in your sideline that you are going to want to use, or you're using your final triggers to quickly go through your deck to get back later with Hellish Blizzard. But with the Blizzard Bunch, we do have a opportunity to give us a BP boost where it's needed. So I honestly overlooked this card at first in terms of when I was building my initial deck, but I do think this one does carry a little bit more weight. Again, maybe could be a 3 of. It's always the sites I'm torn on if it's a 2 or a 3 of, depending on how much filtering that you have in the deck. But this one is going to be really important to help give your frontline that little extra boost that it's going to need more often than not to go to 3k to 4k. Now, against some decks that do have 5k bodies, like a lot of the other green decks we've seen previously, like Karapika and the Lancelot decks, you do need to be mindful about when you're using your specials and what have you. Now, I do think this one is going to be a very difficult to pilot correctly style deck, but it'll probably be the most rewarding deck to pilot correctly in the One Punch Man set, because yes, you're going to want to work on the numbers a little bit, but it does provide us with ways to get extra value that Yellow really struggled with previously. Again, Terrible Tornado being able to reduce the action point, basically just giving us free cards that we get to use. Hellish Blizzard getting us the draw to, letting us pitch extra cards that we maybe not need anymore. And then also the color trigger, and this is going to be kind of a common theme I'm going to be mentioning for everything except green pretty much, is that the color triggers for yellow and red, which did need a little bit of help compared to previous sets, they're actually on cards that we want to be playing a 4 of. So again, the 3 3 energy Hellish Blizzard that also has the color trigger, produces 2 energy in the back line when we just really need the extra value. This is a card that you're going to want to be playing anyways, because once you line up your field, giving itself the 1000 BP plus the Blizzard Bunch, right? You're able to find more ways to manipulate the BP to make it a very solid 4K attacker, and then also just has the search feature that you're looking for. So the biggest area I will say with this deck in particular is just finding out what these various event cards are going to be the right number of. Of course, we do want to still have our 4 finals always, our 4 final specials, for 4 finals, 4 specials always, and then the other ones are just good active triggers, which are good to have if you are light on characters to begin with to give you more blocking value. But then it really comes down to which is going to be the right combination, how many events is too many events, things of that nature. So you will have to play around with this list a little bit more than maybe some of the other ones. But again, I think it will be one that is very, very rewarding. Now going into, and I think I might be a little bit biased, I'll acknowledge that up front, but what I think will end up being the best deck in the format, even if it has a downside, which I will mention, is going to be the green version of Saitama. This is a self-mill ramping style of deck that wants to play a 15 energy card that, yes, does get reduced. We also have the 3 energy Genos reduces itself by cost. The Saitama has a reduction cost effect in the text itself, but this is one that's going to require a little bit of setup, and you have to play a king to the front line, which removes a potential blocker because it cannot attack or block. But it is a raid trigger, so you get to play for free sometimes. It's going to have removal. It is still a very solid card to get out of life as well. And then, of course, once you get to the top end and you have the Saitama and you get to get that impact 3, it's going to feel so, so amazing, except for when there is a final in their last 3 cards. And one thing I do want to mention is that because all those instances are simulated at the same time, if there is a final, your opponent gets to choose the order in which they resolve, and they can make the final resolve last, meaning they will survive. Now, that said, that's still fairly uncommon of a sequence, and Saitama is going to end the game in 2 turns, even with the worst of starts. Plus, we have a lot of extra filtering, or Silverfang, who is also a 4,500, which is a really good blocking number against a lot of the other decks leading up to the One Punch meta that we've seen in North America. So honestly, this is one of the things I probably should have gone to 4 of Silverfang, just because I think it will be that meta relevant if not everyone's automatically jumping on One Punch Man. But I think it is going to be something that's very, very strong in the long term. Now, the one thing that I really got to mention that brings this all together, and you'll immediately notice, is that we are playing a lot of draw triggers. And a main reason for that is actually going to be from Moomin Rider himself being able to give you a discard outlet. So we have King, who is going to be able to help filter things quite a bit, but also then for your stopping early aggression, because if they don't have impact, Moomin Rider, as long as you're hitting some triggers, getting extra draw effects, otherwise is going to keep coming back, give you a blocker, and cycle those cards to your sideline, which is going to allow you to play the Saitama quicker. So I definitely think this is going to be 4 is the right number. It's also an active trigger, which is going to be important because of our BP thresholds are a little bit awkward for what actually goes to the front line until you get into Silverfang. So I think that does round it out quite nicely. And again, having all these extra draw triggers means we don't have to use our action points as often for the extra draw during our draw step. So we are getting a little bit extra consistency from that side in terms of just getting extra draw naturally. This does remind me a lot of kind of the Code Geass deck, the purple one that we've seen, where it just has so many triggers baked into it and so many draw triggers that I think it will have kind of that similar feel to it. So Moomin Rider isn't seen as punishing as he might perceive to be previously. And then I know there's a little bit of debate about the 4 energy Genos being a double blocker, but only being a 4K in this case. Honestly, I still like it for the more aggressive decks because a lot of them are going to be hitting the 3K or 3,500 BP threshold. Now, if you're not seeing a lot of the Demon Slayer yellow or red aggressive strategies, then yes, you can probably cut the raid version. Obviously, you're always going to be playing the 0 version because it's a filter card, draw 1, discard. You're always going to be playing the 3 energy Saitama reducer one. So that does free up some more spaces for like the Silverfang if you want to lean into that direction. But again, this is more of finding the right sequencing that works for your local meta, and expand on it from there. So if you like more of these late game, super powerful style of decks that just want to end the game quickly once they come online, then you're definitely going to want to be checking out this green Saitama deck. Again, I think this will definitely be the one that a lot of people really look forward to playing because of how strong it is. Now, on the opposite side of that, I have to add the disclaimer around Metal Bat. So if Metal Bat is your favorite character or the hero saga or hero archetype as overall, I'm sorry. So this deck is effectively something that we've seen already multiple times with the green Bleach deck, which cares about the number of units on field, as well as the yellow Hashira deck that also has a, hey, play these type of guys on the field. And Metal Bat is also looking to do that once again, but with a more aggressive strategy. So we did have Toshiro, which allows us to lock things down, where Metal Bat, as long as you have the cards in play, right, you're getting impacts, you're able to push through that damage a little bit more naturally, I would say, where it's a little bit difficult in the green Bleach deck by comparison. And then we also have the shocker 4 energy 2 action point removal. It's exactly like Zinpachi, I believe his name was. That it's a 4K body draw card removal. And again, as we've seen very early on in Union Arena meta, when you have a deck that can run 8 removal cards, it is going to be a bit stronger than the rest of the field just because of the extra tempo that it can provide. However, most of the time, those are 1 action point instead of 2 action point cards that you're playing the full 4 of, and doesn't feel as bad to sequence out your returns. But then also the additional caveat, and a lot of this will make sense when I go over to the tier list, is that we are looking at a meta where we suddenly have a bunch of 10Ks, not that we can remove them anyways, or 5Ks even, that our 4K based removal suddenly is a lot more difficult to really get the most value out of. Now, again, things like Blue JJK are still going to be around. Things like the Code Geass decks are absolutely still going to be around. But in terms of the problematic cards that we want to be targeting with these removals traditionally, no longer works or has other conditions that we have to, really struggle to meet. So that can be a little bit of a challenge. Now, for this deck, as I mentioned, is going to be more of an aggressive strategy with the Metal Bat giving impact. We have the Watchdog Man, which can't move, but it is a 4K attacker that you can play for 3 energy early on, which can apply a lot of pressure, surprisingly. And then also we do have Child Emperor, which just gives you the extra draw. Now, it is a little bit weaker, but it is a free draw in this style of deck that cares about having the extra pieces. So all things considered, this does have, a nice, somewhat upgraded version of Green Bleach, but I do have to just fully acknowledge up front, I do think this is the weakest of the One Punch Man decks, and I would have liked to see a little bit more in terms of their payoff for having to have 6 or more of these characters on the field. And then also I do want to give a random shout out to the Puri Puri Prisoner, which is just a really random last-ditch effort of, discarding and just getting the extra 4K attackers when you need them. So there are some, board states where you just have these guys chilling in the back row, and then you have to block out, save your turn, and then you just do one big push with all these 4K attackers. That can be cool, and it is an active trigger, but ultimately there's probably 2 or 3 different cards we would have liked to see to really round out this deck a little bit more. But it does have, again, some aggressive openers that might surprise you. And I do still have to give credit to the color trigger in this case, because it does play a card we care about with Metal Bat, the 2 energy version, being both the color trigger, and it's a 2 energy 3K, which is just nice for attacking. It is a raid fodder to go into the 4 energy version, and it can play it itself with the color trigger, right? If you get 1 out of life and you have 1 in your hand, you can play it. So it's nice to see more of these green color triggers that, are actually on cards that we want to be playing. And I hopefully won't repeat that one more time for this video, but again, it really feels like we are seeing a little bit better of a use case between the cards that are getting the color triggers and how they fit into the various archetypes. I swear I won't say it for the red deck, but I probably will. But overall, that is the Metal Bat list. So again, if you're looking for a more aggressive strategy that's all in about how many heroes you have on the field, then definitely check out this list. Now, for the example I gave up front, and I was really trying to get like a little bit too cheeky with this one and trying to get one of the cards that can accelerate your board on play. But at the end of the day, Speed of Sound Sonic just cares about himself, getting all the versions on the board, doing all this really fast switching. And if you're looking for an aggressive deck, and, you know, spoiler if you're watching at this point of the video, what I'm personally taking to the rare battles, because for the one punch rare battle, I think this is actually the best deck, is going to be Speed of Sound, blistering its way through, getting in the fast attacks. And what I really like about this deck in particular too is that it's not just the red stuff go on board, red stuff attack, but it does have a little bit of kind of micromanaging that you need to do to get the full value out of this by using your sideline and using your outside area correctly, that you can get the additional effect with Speed of Sound and getting those swaps in. Now, the other thing that I just have to say up front that is insane of a card that red got something like this is actually the 3 energy Boros that is a double energy provider and just gets you a ton of draw right off the gate. So it's a 3K body with a double energy that we don't mind playing. Even if we don't hit the raid fodder, like just leaving the back, it's fine. It's getting us the hyper draw to mean we can always play out our action points, and just does so much in a best of one. Again, these things that have such a opportunity to draw us extra cards when we just are playing a best of one game and need the extra consistency. Yes, you are going to be adding a life card to your hand, but again, that's just another tool. You are the aggressive deck. You are going to be in the lead 99 times out of 100. And, you know, if you're playing like a mirror match, or if you are playing an aggressive mirror in general, then yes, you do have to think about if you're going to afford to play the card or not, which can be a little challenging, but I think it is still worth it, you know, 99 times out of 100, because you get the access to the double energy it provides, as well as the extra draw. So staple of a card, absolutely insane. Really excited to see where this one goes. Then, of course, with Mosquito Girl, is just an opportunity to give us a plus 1K bump when we really need it. Either, again, on the Boros, if we promoted him and just want to make him a 4K attacker, or if we know that we have to pump a Speed of Sound onto our energy line, move him up forward, and make him a 4K attacker, right? Things of that nature. But ultimately, a lot of the Speed of Sound cards are very similar in their theming, with just getting attacks or boosting their BP to be aggressive, that it is very much a, hey, all these go together, jam them, you know, in the same deck, and you're good. And then the Garou we're playing because it's a active trigger and it's a 2K body, which is just good for the early damage and being aggressive. But you could also, you know, swap this out for some of the other zeros if you really want to. But the Zero Boros, which is the draw and discard, again, good for filling up our discard for when we want the, or sideline, I should say, when we want the extra triggers to be affected on the activate main once per turn style of cards that we have in this set, or just if you have to find that raid piece, or even the 4 energy 2 action point Speed of Sound that also gets the opportunity to attack and do some crazy things, right? This is all about streamlining your turns to get the most aggressive attacks in as possible. And in the yellow and green One Punch Man decks that do take kind of a significant time to set up, these can be really, really quick at closing out the game before they even have a chance to get into those Saitamas to bring them back. So again, very solid deck. I'm definitely expecting this one to make an appearance everywhere at this point. It just allows you to do so much. And honestly, I think that the red Code Geass decks and even the red Demon Slayer decks are still pretty good in their own right, but this one definitely feels like a leveled up version of red aggro, just because of the Boros and then the utility that Speed of Sound can provide. Then lastly, I gotta say, a little bit of a rant here. Okay, I will say it one more time. Love that we have a color trigger that we actually care about playing, and it works for the deck. It does everything we want to do. All right, I had to say it one more time. But man, this deck is actually super fun, and it's not just like a red aggressive strategy. It's more about self-milling for this really big payoff and watching how these cards kind of come together. So the one thing, again, going to the Speed of Sound versus Garou, they are very, parasitic is a term in their designs, in terms of you just have to be running all of those key cards with one another for how they work. But this is one that is going to take, a little bit more time to ramp up, like the Saitama decks. But then, unfortunately, if we have 2 decks that are about similar time and how much they're ramping up, variance being what it may be, if I'm going to have, you know, the 4,500 that gets impact and then, you know, gets drawn, all this other stuff, or if I'm having a 10K, 3 impact, damage 7, you know, windmill slamming of a guy, probably just going to play that version instead if you're looking for those similar, like, late style of game payoffs. But I do at least like that we got a very different style of red deck, one that is definitely more of a mid-range feel and how it all comes together. And again, got to give a shout out to Boros, which allows us to just get the extra draw. We have Phoenix Man, which is giving us the filter. So increased consistency on a card that also has the draw trigger is always a welcome thing. And then the one card I will also say that I know a lot of people aren't running yet. And again, I just love that we have playable sites in Union Arena, but I will stand behind the Monster Association card because it gives you the extra mill and gives you a little bit more of an acceleration when you really need it, but also it is a double energy provider. So this is what I'm going to need to play around with more and really, you know, actually sleeve up, test how quickly we can mill through because this is a card that might end up actually being a 3 or 4 of just because you want to speed run as fast as you can to 15 cards in your sideline, which is a lot for a card that otherwise doesn't have a lot of good filtering options. So this is definitely one that will require a little bit more fine tuning, but if you want a more just mid-range, good value self-mill style of deck that has some really cool top-end cards, then the Garou deck might be the one for you. But again, this is one that I'm really excited to see them cook up a little bit, especially for a red deck. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into the tier list at the very end. Oh my God, all the One Punch Man decks. The set is busted, all that stuff. Yeah, kind of. It really is. And I think part of that really goes back to understanding that this is the first simultaneous launch with Japan, which is why I am rating all of these so high. And a few disclaimers for those that have maybe missed my other videos. And maybe I will update this at some point, but this is really tier 1, tier 1.5, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. And anything with a star on it means that it will get a volume 2, or when we get the volume 2, it will get support and get boosted up a little bit. So that's where you see all the various ones. And now, kind of the big upsetties that we have to mention, right? So One Punch Man is cracked. I think it is going to be a huge meta shakeup for us. I definitely think all 3 of these are top tier 1 competitors. Honestly, Speed might also be a solid tier 1, but red decks traditionally, I've just always stuck them at 1.5 due to consistency issues previously, but we might buff that up. And then the Garou, I'll have to play at this one, but I think it is more of like a tier 2 just because it's a little bit slower than what we have up here, and the aggro deck, I think, plays well into it. Now, the ones that we got to acknowledge, I did move down Purple Bleach overall because we are entering a meta where we have a lot more 5Ks, or we have 10Ks that we just can't remove. So things like Ichigo's minus just doesn't do anything anymore at that point, or it's too costly, or it doesn't hit the right things, right? That can be a little bit of a struggle. And then Bomber, which traditionally would be good in more aggressive formats and like hitting a bunch of 3Ks. Now we're shifting that number more consistently up to 4K. And also, I don't think the volume 2 is going to help it enough that I'm not sure if it goes at like the bottom of tier 2 or if it just has to be a tier 3 now. But Bomber, I also recognize, right? The BP thresholds have been changed that these need to get moved. Where meanwhile, you still have things like Lancelot, which is going to be a powerhouse on the back end. Even if you don't pop something, you still just have a 5K that is KOing everything. Kurapika has Snipe, so he's still just removing stuff all the same. And Blue JJK, both versions, you can go up to 5K pretty easily. You can have the Shrine play. There's a lot more combinations there. And then Purple Code Geass is just always really good with all the triggers, all the consistency. The combos that you can play out of it are super, super strong that I think it's still, you know, maybe this should be 1.5 as well because the minus 1000 BP is not as relevant, right? So that maybe that could come down as well. But I think that the Code Geass set is very, very strong overall still. So yes, this is just a tier list prediction at the end of the day. I always like including one of these at the end just to like try to conceptualize it as much as possible. I know everyone's going to have their own tier list at the end of the day and kind of fight over it tooth and nail, but it's just a fun little conversation piece here at the end. But honestly, if you were to ask me, like, what can I play at my locals and do well with? It's any of these decks, like B and higher, which is what, 4, 9, 10, 14, 16 different decks that you can play. And maybe Metal Bat, depending on what your locals is, right? But that is a ton of viable decks to play in a card game that most of the time, right, we only see 4 or 5 because Union Arena is built a little bit differently from a philosophical perspective and having the different IPs. So with that out of the way, let me know your thoughts. What do you think is the best One Punch Man deck that we're going to see out of this format? Honestly, again, for me, I am leaning towards green Saitama, but I think it will be a toss-up between yellow hybrid and the green hybrid that we end up getting put together. But fingers crossed, we'll have some big meta news here very soon. We'll have another Eggman event to look forward to, but I know that regional information should be coming up by the end of this month, so not too much longer, and we'll get to see more of those large-scale Union Arena battles take place, and I'll be very excited to hopefully go to a few. We'll see what this year has, but and with that, that does wrap up our video for today. Next week, we will have some versus videos. I just have to find time to record and all that stuff, but definitely look forward to it. Lots more Union Arena content to come. So until next time, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.